Hi, my name is Anthony. I'm the Generations Pastor here at United Church. Right now, we're in a series called This Is How We Love Delaware, where we're talking about how we live out our mission to love Delaware until our heart beats like his. We hope you enjoy this message.
Man, this morning we are kicking off continuing in this brand new series called This Is How We Love Delaware. Last week I exploded. Like that was all I can explain. Like I just got pumped, man. God filled me up, and I just came in here and I just blew up on everybody. And man, hopefully, you left here as excited as I did. I was jacked up on Mountain Dew last week. I don't know about y'all. But God did something inside of me. He stirred something inside of me. And I'm believing that that's going to continue to happen as we journey through this experience. But today, I want to teach a message called 2-inch moments. 2-inch moments. And as I was reading a book called Creativity, Inc. By a guy named Ed Catmull, who is the president of Pixar Animation and Disney Animation. I mean, he's a kind of a big deal. He's got some street cred, so the things that I'm going to talk to you about today, this is kind of his story, and so this is story time with Kenneth. Sit back and enjoy, okay? So check this out. It says this. He says, "We know that there are happy accidents, but there is still another level of hiddenness that relates to the confluence of events that presage any important happening. Often, some of these events are impossible to see, and so we don't realize how key a role they played. Consider the children who attend Pixar's daycare program, many of whom are the offspring of the couples who met at Pixar. And think of all the things that had to happen to make those babies possible. If Pixar had never existed, they would never have been born. And you can turn back the clock a bit more and say that those babies' parents might never have met if John, his coworker, didn't join the production of The Adventures of Andre and Wally B, or if Walt Disney had never existed, or if I hadn't been lucky enough to study under Yvonne Sutherland at University of Utah." Look at your neighbor and say, "We're going somewhere." That's good, because we are. We're going to get to the point. Or turn back to 1957 when I was 12 years old, returning from vacation in Yellowstone Park with my family. My dad was driving our yellow Ford 57 station wagon. Come on, somebody. Anybody seen one of those in person? My mom was in the passenger seat, and my brothers and sisters and I were piled into the back. There were no car seats. They were in the back dash, you know what I mean? Just kind of hanging out, doing their thing. We were traveling up a winding canyon road with a steep cliff immediately to our right and no guardrail. Suddenly, up ahead from around a bend, came a car that had drifted into our lane. I remember my mother screaming and my father slamming on the brakes. He couldn't swerve because the cliff was a few feet to the right. I remember time slowing down in a moment of utter quiet before, bang, the other car slammed into us, crushing the side of the car. And when we finally slid to a stop, the adults got out and started yelling at each other. How many of you know that sounds like your family? Come on. But I just stood there staring at the damage to our car. If the other car had veered another 2 inches into our lane, it would have caught our front bumper instead of the side and pushed us right over the cliff. Existential threats like this tend to stay with you. 2 more inches and no Pixar. Of course, many people have close calls like this in the course of their lives, but here's the salient point. As I write this, all of those Pixar couples I'm so proud to know have no inkling of the 2 inches that could have kept them from meeting their children from being conceived. I've heard people say that Pixar's success was inevitable because of the character of the people who formed it. And while character is crucial, I'm also certain that there were an infinite number of 2-inch events or 2-inch moments, aside from my own, that went our way. Events that I have no way of knowing about because they occurred in the lives of other people who were critical to forming Pixar. As I started to read this I was reading this last summer, man, my heart just exploded. Because I began to think of the 2-inch moments in my life that have led me to this point. But as I was thinking about these 2-inch moments in regards to him, I started thinking about 2 more inches and there would be no Buzz Lightyear. And that would be a sad existence. Anybody with me? Woody, there's a snake in my boot. There would be none of that. That wouldn't have happened. 2 more inches and there would have been no Monsters, Inc. There would have been no Incredibles. And I wish there would have been no Up. You know what I mean? That movie was horrible. If you liked it, I'm sorry. But as I read this, my life flashed before my eyes. I started to think, as I said, the 2-inch moments that God has used to bring me to this point today. And so I thought that it would be important, church, if I just shared a few of those with you as the pastor of your church. Can I do that? It's again, continuing story time with Kenneth. Is that okay? I mean, you're here. Okay, so we might as well. If you get too bored, I mean, you can always go. Like, I'm just saying, but like, just stay here. That would be better, right? But I was a senior in high school in December of 2003. My best friend at that point, his name was Sean Gasperson. He said, hey, Kenneth, have you ever heard of these youth conventions? And he began to describe them to me. He's like, man, there's thousands of kids that come together, and it's really cool, and you should come check it out. And I was at that point, man, God had begun to work on me, on my inner and my outer circle. We talked about that a few weeks ago. If you missed that, go back and watch that. It was incredible. But God began to work on me and began to whittle away those who were in the outer circle and the voice they had into my life. And he began to speak to me through my friend Sean at that point. He said, so I went to the convention. And I remember this older guy was up and he was sharing about somebody in the room, people in the room were going to give their life to serving the church all the days of their life. I mean, we're all called to ministry. Don't let me confuse you. But he said there are certain people who are going to, like, that is going to be your career. And I'm like, that's really cool for somebody else, right? That is a really cool call for somebody. And by the time he gave the response, I found myself walking to the front. And I'm like, oh, Lord Jesus, I know what pastors make. And I didn't want to eat beanie weenies the rest of my life. Like, you know what I'm saying? I didn't want to do that. And so I'm like, man, how in the world is this happening? So you fast forward a little bit, and a few months later, Sean says to me again, he says, I bet you won't. And we've talked about this before at United Church. If any guy starts a sentence with, I bet you won't, it doesn't matter if it's illegal, dangerous, it's going to happen, right? I bet you won't call the baseball coach at Southern Wesleyan. So I picked up the phone and called him and left the most arrogant message possible. And he calls me back the next week. And it led to a journey of me going to Southern Wesleyan University. My freshman year, I'm sitting in the freshman dorm on the couch over here, and I'm sitting with one of my new good friends, Davey, who is my best friend still to this day. And he looks at me and he says, I bet you won't. Again, I bet you won't. He starts the sentence again. And I'm like, oh, this is bad. It's going to happen. I bet you won't talk to her. And it was Sherry walking to the elevator. It was like, da, 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 da. Just like the ding, you know what I mean? Like the little on the two thing. And the best thing that I could come up with, guys, the best thing I could come up with is, hey, girl. Like, this was a Christian girl. I'm not like hanging out in a bar, like, hey, girl, like that doesn't work there. And she looks at me like, yeah? Like, what do you got? Man, God used, we went from hey girl to hey girl, you know what I'm saying? So it all worked out, but yeah. But I remember in college, I went to Clemson FCA, and it was one of the largest FCAs in the nation. And I remember going there one night, and this guy named Mark Cahill was speaking, and he started talking about the one thing you can't do in heaven. And I was, at that point, I'm like hooked. I'm like, one thing you can't do in heaven? I thought you could do everything in heaven. Like, you tell me, Mark, what can't I do in heaven? And he began to talk about the one thing you can't do in heaven is tell people about Jesus. Like, you had your opportunity here, and man, my heart literally, again, in my life, it exploded. It was a 2-inch moment for me. Man, people ask me all the time, why are you so crazy? Why are you so passionate about seeing people who are far from God be united with? Why are you so passionate about seeing marriages come back together? Because it was one of those 2-inch moments where my heart just exploded inside of me for the possibilities of what the church of Jesus Christ could be. It was a 2-inch moment, just like that. I remember getting to the end of my college time, and I interviewed at a few different churches. I went to Florida, and I'm like, God, call me to Florida. Just call me to Florida. I'll go. Send me. I'll suffer, right? I will do it. And I remember the pastor offered me and Sherry the job, and we just didn't feel like that was where we were supposed to be. So, Pastor Mark, I'm just not sure this is the right place. And so this pastor from South Dakota had been calling me. And I began to pray and fast even harder. God, please don't send me to South Dakota. You're messing with my emotions. Like, I went from Florida to South Dakota. He said, if I told you it was 0 degrees, would you still be interested in coming? And he was serious. I looked on weather.com and it was 0 degrees. I'm from North Carolina. I don't even know what 0 degrees feels like. Like, people start breaking around that point. Like, I'm just convinced. And so I began to pray, and we tried to fly out there, and it became obvious that was not where we were supposed to go. And so we got to this interview in North Carolina. We were going to take this church, this position in North Carolina. I'd interned for 2 summers at this church. It was a shoe-in. It was easy. And I went to, the day before I was going to call the pastor and tell him that I accept the position. The executive pastor from Calvary Wesleyan Church in Harrington, Delaware called me and said, hey, we want to talk to you about this position. I said, hey, Pastor Barry, that's cool, but I'm about to accept this position tomorrow. But if anything happens, I'll give you a call. I called the pastor the next day and he said, I said, Pastor Sam, I'm excited. I'm ready to go. Like, let's do this. Like, I'm on board. Like, I'm all in. And he says, I meant to call you yesterday, Kenneth. We decided to go with the older, more experienced guy. And it was like the rug was jerked out from underneath. You ever felt that way? Like in your life, the rug was, it took my breath away. And so I picked up the phone, did the only thing I knew to do. I called Pastor Barry. I said, Pastor Barry, something happened, right? Something did happen. And so we went into a conversation and we visited a couple times. On the second visit, I remember sitting down for breakfast, another 2-inch moment, and Pastor Ken is speaking to me. He's still the lead pastor there in Calvary Wesleyan Church in Harrington, Delaware, and he says to me, he says, this position, Kenneth, is for somebody who has much more experience. This position is for somebody who's much older, not just somebody who's fresh out of college. And I was like, hey, genius, you're the one who flew me here. I didn't say that, but I was thinking that. And so we traveled to Milford, and we were out in front of Big Lots because we know that all good things happen in front of Big Lots, right? Somebody loves Big Lots. Praise God. You got a new building coming and everything. Big Lots. But I remember standing in front of Big Lots, and I remember Sherry and his wife Debbie were in the store, and I said, Pastor Ken, I know you said that this is for somebody much older, this is for somebody much more experienced, but I want to tell you, if you give me a chance, if you give me an opportunity, I will never let you down. I will fight, I will claw, I will scratch, I will do whatever it takes to see this thing happen. And man, I tell you, I never knew that response until later on was a response that would be potentially allowed me the opportunity to serve the rest of my life in Delaware. And so in 2010, we started a student ministry, a brand new student ministry at Calvary Wesleyan Church. And over the next 5 years, we saw nearly 800 students find new life in Jesus Christ. It was amazing. We saw dozens go forward in public. And I was standing in 2013 in the back of Ignite Camp where our students just came off of about a month and a half ago. And one of my mentors, he says to me, he says, Kenneth, I got a question for you. And I mean no disrespect by this. And this guy is like an MMA fighter, and I was scared for my life. I thought he was going to roundhouse kick me or something. I was ready. And he said, why haven't you planted a church or started a church with that team? And he was pointing to some of the team that leads worship. How many of you guys love the people that lead worship? It's amazing. He said, why haven't you planted a church with that team? And then he started talking about the production team, and I didn't have a good answer. Fast forward a couple weeks, I was sitting in a worship experience, and God clearly spoke to me. He said, Kenneth, I want you to love Delaware until their heart beats like mine. I started to think about all the 2-inch moments that have led me to this point, all of the 2-inch moments that have led me to this platform to be the pastor of United Church. And I'll tell you this, that man, it could not be crazier. If I had to draw it up myself, I would not have ever drawn it up this way. But God, in His infinite wisdom, He chooses this way. And so this morning, here's what I want to ask you to do for just one moment, is I want you to reflect on how you're sitting in the seat you're sitting in right now. What was the conversation like that led you to being here? Did somebody promise you lunch? You're waiting, you're like, Pastor, if you just finished, I can get to my blueberry pancakes a lot faster. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to get to IHOP. It's all you can eat. That was a little plug for them. I don't know what the 2-inch moment is for you that got you there. Maybe somebody dragged you. Maybe somebody bribed you. Maybe you saw it on Facebook. Maybe you got a mailer in the mail when we launched. I don't know what it is for you, but I believe there are 2-inch moments that lead to us to where we are. And God in His infinite wisdom, we look back and we think that these are just happenstance, but God in His infinite wisdom was preparing us for such a time as this. You see, sometimes you have to reflect on God's past provision to give you the confidence you need that He will provide for you in the future. That sometimes you got to look back and say, God, I saw you. You got me through that. You got me through that. You've got me through all these things, and I'm just trusting that the wall I'm up against right now, you're going to get me through this too. It's 2-inch moments that lead us to where we are today. And so today, I want to talk to you about our next 2-inch moment as a church. And so if you got your Bible, turn with me to the book of Judges. It's the 7th book in the Bible. So if you are new to the Bible, just kind of flip over, kind of go to the 7th book and you'll find it there. If you don't have a Bible, we would love to give you one right out of guest services after we finish this experience. But today, we're going to talk about a guy named Gideon. And Gideon's a fierce name. Would you agree with me? Like if I meet a guy named Gideon on the back alley, I'm like, well, here's my wallet, my keys, whatever you want. Gideon, like I'm about to get stomped right here, so just take it all. And so his parents loved him. They gave him a fierce name. And so Gideon is an incredible guy. But we see this morning, I want to point out 3 things from this passage that I believe that if we're going to step into our 2-inch moment, our next 2-inch moment, if we're going to walk confidently into that 2-inch moment, I think these are 3 things that we need to get. These are 3 things that we'll be on a constant pursuit of in our entire lives. These aren't 3 check marks today and we're finished. These are 3 things that we'll constantly be on a pursuit of. So if you got your Bible, Judges chapter 7, verse 1, it says this. It says, Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod. I want to point out something there that successful people, we'll find out in a minute, but I think this is really good to point out. Successful people rise early. And the camp of Midian was north of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. And the Lord said to Gideon, The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, My own hand has saved me. Now, therefore, proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, Whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead. And then 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remain. 10,000 remain. I find it interesting. The first thing that I want to point out to you today is if we're to step into our next 2-inch moment is that we must trust in the Lord. And maybe today you're like, man, I went out on a limb. I came to church and I expected to hear something a little bit more applicable. I expected to hear like, man, they were going to give me something I could apply today. But now you're telling me something that I've heard before. Trust in the Lord. Pastor, it's not that easy. It's not that easy. I want to kind of give you some confidence to be able to do just that. Maybe today you don't have the confidence you need to trust in the Lord, but today I want to kind of stiffen your back up a little bit. I want to help you hold your head a little bit higher as you trust. Can we do that today, church? Is that okay? We just get a little bit more confidence in our step. We see that Gideon he went from 32,000 men to 10,000 men. And I'm thinking that Gideon in the back of his mind must have been thinking, God, you better have a plan. Like, God, you bet something up your sleeve. Like, you better have something to help me out in this moment. How many of you guys love watching the game when the underdog is winning? Anybody you enjoy that? Yeah. I love, one of the things I love doing, I love watching like UFC or MMA. Any UFC fans in here? Yeah. I love, Sherry hates it. She's like, your body is the temple. And they're beating each other to a pulp. This is not right. And if you think that way, you don't have to watch it, but I will, okay? So we watch that. I watch that, and Sherry's like, I'm going to go do something else. And so I love seeing the guy who is the underdog. I love seeing he just gets scrappy. He's going after it. He's pulling out all the stops, just trying. Look, I've constantly been cheering for the underdog. I'm a Cubs fan. And so I know what it means to be at the bottom. Like I've always been, this year, praise God, I've got something to celebrate, but typically I'm cheering for the underdog. How many of you guys know that our God is the God of the underdog? That our God, in so many instances we see in Scripture, that our God is the God of the underdog. And oftentimes God has to stack the odds against us to where it looks like there is no way. He oftentimes makes sure that He alone will be able to get the glory. Verse number 2 says this again. It says, Lord said to Gideon, the people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me. You see, you ever been in over your head in life? You ever just felt like you're so far, you can't even see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like you are buried, you are so discouraged. You are so like backed into a corner. You see, here's what I know. I think that sometimes it's just a gentle reminder from God saying, look, I had to put you in that situation so that you wouldn't take the credit when you got out of it. Like sometimes I got to stack the odds against you. I got to back you into a corner so much that there's no way else you could explain it away. You can't say, oh no, I'm good. I took care of it. I got this under control. You would have to only be able to point all of the glory. You would have to be able to point all of the credit and say, God, you alone, you are the only way that I got out of this corner. Anybody ever been in a pit like that and God got you out? Yeah, God is a God of the underdogs. I love it. He is faithful to do that. He is faithful to come through. It's amazing. Could you imagine what must have been going through Gideon's mind? He's like, God, you went from 32,000 to 10,000. Like, God, I'm trusting you, but we're going to see. I mean, he's a human too, right? Yeah. He's not superhuman. He has these thoughts before. He's had these thoughts before, but today I want to tell you that if you're backed into a corner, if maybe you feel like all the odds are stacked against you, I want you to know that you may just be perfectly positioned for God to do a miracle in your life. He's a God of the underdogs. We need to trust in the Lord. Verse 4, it says this, and the Lord said to Gideon, the people are still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. And any one of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you. And any one of whom I say to you, this one shall not go with you, shall not go. And so he brought the people down to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, everyone who laps the water with his tongue as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink. And the number of those who lap, putting their hands to their mouths, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people knelt down to drink water. And the Lord said to Gideon, with the 300 men who lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hand, and let all the others go, every man to his home. Don't you just find it interesting? God just does things differently than we would have. Like, God often has a different, he's like, I'm gonna set you up, Gideon, and if they lap with their hands, like, those are the men who are going to be with you. God, like, you couldn't have sent like a text message or an email or something, right? Like, you got, church. Look, we have fun at United Church, so feel free to engage. Feel free to laugh. Say, preach it, white boy, whatever you got to do. Like, I mean, look, we're having fun today. Maybe this is new for you in church, right? Welcome to United. But man, let me tell you this. Look, the second thing I noticed is not only trust in the Lord, but we have to have obedience to the Lord. We have to have obedience to the Lord. Gideon could have completely disregarded what God said. He could have completely said, God, I think you said that, but I'm not real sure, so I'm just going to do my own thing. You see, he went from 32,000 to 10,000. Now he's rolling with 300 men. Roughly 1% of his men remained. How many of you know that God's blessing on our 1% is greater than no blessing on our 100%? That when God asks us to do something, when we think, oh, I don't know if I can do this, look, little is much in the hands of God. That He can bless us and He can blow our mind when He comes through. Man, God is the God of the underdogs. He is worth trusting. He is worth our obedience. And how many of you know this today, that partial obedience is still full disobedience? That partial obedience in our life, that if there are things that God is asking us to do, and like, God, you know, we reason with God. We start like making wagers with Him. God, I'll do this if you do this. God, I'll do that if you do this. And what we end up doing is not realizing that partial obedience is still full disobedience. You see, Gideon knew and understood that God's blessing truly was better on 1%, on his 1% than all of his kind of conjuring up of the 100% that he had. And so he trusted and had obedience. And obedience is simply this. Let me give you what I believe obedience is defined as. Is time after time listening to God and doing what He says. Just listening to God and doing what He says. That's obedience. Check out verse 8. I'm going to read it to you from here. It says, so the people took provisions in their hands and their trumpets, and he sent all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, but retained the 300 men. And the camp of Midian was below him in the valley. That same night the Lord said to him, arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand. So he's given him the confidence. He says this, but if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Purah, your servant. You know what I love about God? Is that He knows us better than we know ourselves. He knew that Gideon, he's known as the mighty man of valor. He knew that he is a mighty warrior in the eyes of God. But he says, look, but if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Purah, your servant. If we're to step into our next 2-inch moment, there's sometimes where we just can't do it on our own. There's sometimes in our life where we have to lock arms with somebody else and we have to do it together. I'm so excited for the launch of groups that's coming up this fall, because here's what I know is that life is better in circles than it is in rows. I know that God does so much more when we gather around. We're able to talk about what is going on in our life. You see, God puts the Purahs in our life in order to help us have the faith when we don't have the faith. There's people that when sometimes in our life when we don't have the faith, we need to go to them and borrow theirs. You ever been there before? You're like, I'm not real sure if I can get through this, but because my friend, because my confidant is telling me that I can, that I'm going to walk with my head held high and I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for it. I love that God knows us better than we know ourselves. Verse 11 says this. It says, and you shall hear what they say, and afterward your hands shall be strengthened to go down against the camp. And then he went down with Purah his servant to the outposts of the armed men who were in the camp, and the Midianites and the Amalekites, and all the people of the east lay along the valley like locusts in abundance. And their camels were without number, as the sand that is on the seashore in abundance. I'm thinking in the back of my mind that Gideon must be thinking, like there's as many as them as there is sea on the seashore. And I've got 300. God, you've got to come through. And he says, when Gideon came, behold, a man was telling a dream to his comrade. And he said, behold, I dreamed a dream. And behold, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp. Again, God using things that we would never have expected, into the camp of Midian, and came to the tent and struck it so that it fell, and turned it upside down, and so that the tent lay flat. And his comrade answered, this is no other than the sword of Gideon. What kind of timing is this? This is amazing, right? God has told him, he's told him to go down and you're going to hear something that's going to give you the confidence to move forward. This is none other than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp. And as soon as Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, he worshiped, and he returned to the camp of Israel and said, arise, for the Lord has given the host of Midian into your hand. Just leave this right here for a second. He says, into your hand. I love that Gideon didn't even take any credit for what, he didn't say that they've placed Midian into my hand. He says they've placed Midian into whose hand? The 300 men who are with him, right? He's prodding them on. He's saying he's lifting them up. I find this just incredible because I think that Gideon could have got a big head. He could have got a little arrogant. He could have got a little haughty when it comes to this word that God had given him. He's like, God said he's going to take them out. He's going to kick butt and take names. Like, somebody get on board because I got this. No, he doesn't say that at all. It says that he fell down and he what? He worshiped. He pointed it all back to God and said, God, I know you gave me this vision. I know you allowed me to hear this and allowed me, my servant Purah to hear this. But God, it wasn't for my glory. God, it was all for your glory. And so God, I'm going to point it back to you before I am tempted to take the credit for myself. And so God is telling us in this same season, God, church, don't be tempted to take the credit. Don't be tempted to think that we've done something good. I'm not tempted to think that it's about me, because Lord knows He uses the weak to lead the strong. I'm the dumbest of the dumb. I'm like the worst of the worst. But God has used us in this season to be able to do something special. And what I want to relate this to is this, is that Gideon, that God knew that he had to hear it so that he would believe it. God knew that Gideon's heart, God knows us better than we know ourselves. And Gideon was given this holy confidence in this moment. He was given this holy confidence to step foot in this land and say, look, I don't have 32,000, I don't have 10,000, but I've got 300, and you better get ready because I'm about to take y'all out. Like, that's what's about to happen. It's about to be like a Hollywood movie scene, explosions happening over here, trumpets blowing. I don't know why they had trumpets. Maybe they're beating somebody with some trumpets, but use whatever you got. Use what's in your hands. I don't know what was going on, but man, God began to use them, and something incredible happened out of this. You see, he knew that he had to hear it in order to believe it. And here's what I know about God with us, is that I believe that God knew I needed to hear it so that I would believe it. And in 2013, God said, I want you to love Delaware until their heart beats like mine. And church, I knew it wouldn't be something small. I knew we wouldn't be able to contain this. I knew that this would be something where God's hand was on this, because when God speaks and you obey, amazing things just begin to happen. You guys have seen it in your business. You guys have seen it in serving this church. You guys have seen it somewhere in your life that when people obey, when people follow God, man, God just begins to open doors that you would have never imagined, and the floodgates just begin to come open. And so as your pastor, I'm always trying to keep one foot in the now while I keep one foot in the future. And I'll be honest, it's hard for me to enjoy the now because I'm all the time thinking about the future. Anybody struggle with that too? Like you're a visionary. You're thinking about what's to come. You're thinking about what you're going to do. And I'm always dreaming, God, what do you have for us? God, what is next? But I'm always trying to stay grounded in the now, because I think sometimes you have to celebrate what God is doing in the now so you can appreciate where He's taking you in the future. And so as I began to think about this, I want to share some vital statistics that I think that are going to just, I hope they fire you up today, man, because they have fired me up as I began to study these. Man, over this last year, we launched in September 20th. Our first Sunday was September 20th, 2015. We have seen 358 people respond to the gospel and make Jesus Christ their Lord. That's incredible. I want you guys to know that people clap louder at a football game because a piece of leather goes through an upright. 358 people have responded to the gospel. Come on. We got pigskin going through an upright and we're yelling louder. This is crazy. I'm excited. Over the last 5 weeks, we have averaged 142 united kids learning Jesus on their level. Listen, I want you to know, I want you to know we're not anti-kid. It's not that we don't want your kid in the auditorium. We know that they're going to learn Jesus on their level when they get under the teachings. The truths of the gospel are planted into their heart. 142 of them, man. I'm fired up. Over the last 5 weeks, I told you guys that during summer we weren't going to hit the brakes. We were just going to punch the gas and just see what happens. Best Summer Ever was one of my favorite series that we've ever done. And man, over the last 5 weeks, we've been averaging 870 people in this church on Sunday mornings. God is doing something big. And so as we begin to pray about what God had for us, the 1 foot in the future, 1 foot in the now. God, what is our next step? God, what do you have for us? Our next 2-inch moment happened. And man, I want to tell you this, that our next 2-inch moment is going to give us the opportunity to teach more kids Jesus on their level. Our next 2-inch moment is going to allow us to reach into the neighborhoods and reach your family and your friends and your neighbors. Our next 2-inch moment is going to allow us to serve this community in an even greater capacity. Our next 2-inch moment is going to allow us to serve every guest that shows up with excellence. And so I'm excited to tell you that on September 18th, our next 2-inch moment is we're going to be moving to the brand new Dover High School. I don't know about you guys, but I am jacked up about this. Come on. Come on. Yeah. 3 people standing. We got some people excited. Come on. Come on. I believe you guys can be seated. I believe that God is up to something big. God is up to something massive. And so I wasn't able to take all of you on a field trip. And so we recorded this video so you guys could check it out. Take a look. What's up, United Church? Right now, I am standing on the stage at the brand new Dover High School. Man, I remember in July of 2013 when God spoke to me to love Delaware until their heart beats like His. And the vision went even deeper than that. And by the end of the vision, God had showed me that Route 8 was where we were supposed to be. And so I would drive up and down Route 8 and I would see all kinds of buildings, just wondering if this is the building or if that is the building. And at that time, they were building this school. And I remember I would take pictures. I would send pictures to Pastor Mark, and I would send pictures to Ryan saying, man, they are building the place where we're going to be meeting for church, and not even knowing that almost a year into planting that would happen. I knew that starting a church in an auditorium that was so large would be a quick start to a dead end. But man, it is amazing to think that in 1 year, God has brought us full circle right back to this place. Behind me, there are 921 seats. Church, 921 opportunities for people who are far from God to be united with Christ. 921 opportunities for stories to be told, for marriages to be restored, for relationships to just be made whole, and for people to find the peace and find the joy that all of us share in this room. And so, man, I am so excited for what God is going to do in and through this opportunity. I believe that now is the time. I believe that this is the place, and I believe that we are the people, church. Right now, I'm standing at one of the main entrances of Dover High School, the main entrance that we'll be using every single Sunday morning for United Church. And behind me, you'll see an expanse of parking that gives us such an awesome opportunity to park all of our guests. The amount of people that show up is the amount of parks that we'll have, and we're pumped about that opportunity. We're also going to be able to block off a VIP section to be able to treat our first-time guests like the valued people that they are. We truly believe that they are VIP here at United Church. And we believe that all of this parking behind us is going to give our parking team an incredible opportunity to wow every single guest that walks through our doors and shows up into the parking lot at United Church. And so I'm going to take you guys inside. We're going to show you guys some more of this incredible building at the new Dover High School. Let's go. Hey church, we are standing right inside the main entrance, and to my right and to your left is where United Kids will be. They have an entire hallway, like an entire wing where we're excited to be able to expand what we're gonna be able to do with your kids, to be able to teach Jesus on their level. And so we're just pumped about that. And also to my left and to your right is a massive lobby. I mean, this lobby is so big. I just imagine so much community happening, people being able to grab a cup of coffee and to be able to catch up with some friends. There's bathrooms located conveniently right off of this main space. And so we're super pumped about what this part of Dover High School is going to be able to provide for us, this idea of community, this idea of the new kids space. And so let's continue on. We're going to head to the other side of the lobby. Let's check it out. Standing here at the opposite end of the lobby that we were just in, and behind me, man, I see so many opportunities for things happen. People grabbing a cup of coffee or heading to VIP or guest services. And even further down the hallway, I'm excited to tell you about a brand new thing that we're going to be able to offer when we move to Dover High School. It's a care team. That when people respond in an experience, they're going to have people that are able to pray with them, whether they respond to salvation, whether it's a next step in their faith, whatever it may be, they're going to have people there to pray with them, to laugh with them, and to cheer them on in their faith. And so we are super excited about this opportunity here at Dover High School. Who's excited about that? Yeah. So pumped, so excited. Listen, I'm telling you, it's all about 2-inch moments. It's all about these 2-inch moments in our life. And I keep a whole list in my Evernote of 2-inch moments for United Church. And on February 7th, 2016, I had been praying for an in into Capital School District. God just introduced me to somebody who can give me an in to Capital School District so I can talk to the superintendent, talk to the people, the powers that be that would allow us to do this. And God, I just began to pray and ask God for that. And on February 7th, 2016, I was standing in the lobby right back there, and somebody walked up to me, Gab Gedney walked up to me, and she says, I want to introduce you to somebody. This is Courtney. Oh, hey Courtney, how are you doing? She's the principal of Dover High School. God said, you were praying for an in into Capital School District. How about I just give you an in to the school? He's a one-upper, is what God is. Man, I just tell you, I have this vision for what I believe United Church is going to be in our community. I believe that we're going to see people's lives change. I believe, as I said in the video, I believe that marriages truly are. I'm seeing it happen like on a weekly basis. I'm hearing stories of families that are being brought back. I'm hearing this. It's crazy, church. And so here's the catch. Is that I want every single person, I challenge the first experience, I want to challenge you to, is I want you to pray about what God would have you participate. This whole transition is going to cost us. We're investing. It's not a cost. It's an investment. About $95,000. We're literally doubling all the imprint. We're doubling all the signage, all the kids' space, all of the auditoriums. It's amazing what God is doing. But I want to ask you this, is that you would pray and ask God, whether it be for $1 or whether it be for $100,000, God, what would you have me to participate over and above my regular tithe and offering? And you may say, look, you came to church, you're like, he's asking for money. That's what I figured would happen. Listen, I have no shame. I'm not bashful, because I know that the money that comes into our church is used for kingdom purposes. We don't blow money. We don't spend it on stupid stuff. Man, we ask God and we do what he says. And so I stand in front of you today saying that this is good soil. It's saying that this will return. There will be a harvest for what you sow. And you're like, oh, I've heard that before. I don't know if I believe it, church. I'm asking you to buy into it today, because God is going to do something crazy. He's going to do something crazy. Here's the cool thing about that $95,000 is that we've committed $15,000 of that to be invested directly into Capital School District. We believe that God, we believe that this is more than just us using a facility on a Sunday morning. We want to be the greatest partner that Capital School District has. We want to be the greatest partner that Dover has. And then when we fulfill our mission in Dover, let's go to Camden. When we fulfill our mission in Camden, let's go to Milford. When we fulfill it down south, let's go north to Middletown. Let's go to Newark. Let's go to Wilmington. And let's begin to see Delaware's heart begin to beat like the Father's. This is how we love Delaware. Church, this is how we love Delaware. How many of you can get on board with a vision like that? You can get on board. You can get fired up about a vision like that. It's more than about nickels and noses. It's about hearts and lives being changed. And so today I want to ask you to stand to your feet. We're going to sing this, God with us, God for us. Nothing can stand against us. Do you believe that, church? I believe it. Let's worship Him today. As you leave today, you're going to receive a little 2-inch united arrow to remind you of the 2-inch moments that have led you to this place. So church, let's worship Him today.